Hello, good evening, and welcome to a new episode of Arguably the Reading Quest. I am Nishant. These days, again, there is a clamor for reading, but it seems that the books that are worthy to be read and to be reread are lying behind the glass pins of our bookshelves, staring at us as if we have pushed them into an oblivion. What are people reading these days? I mean, for the past 10-15 years, it seems as if there's a flood of self-help books that has flooded the market and clouded our thoughts and clear perception. For example, Men Are From Mars and Women From Venus, Who Move My Cheese, Rich Dad Poor Dad, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F-star CK, Everything is F-star CK, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Should we call them self-help or should we call them self-hoax? In the name of self-help industry, there is a great sham that is going on, and self-help industry is thriving multi-billion industry that thrives on people's hope, that thrives on people's desire to lead a happy life but to no avail. So what it does in the name of self-help is that it ends up creating customers, it ends up creating business without giving a proper solution. It is like a drug that every time you need to have a little bit of extra ounce of it in order to have the desired effect. So this time I thought of doing this episode particularly in the name of self-help book, and why you should not read self-help book, and what are the substitutes available in the market or has always been available. There are gems of writers and philosophers. If you'll read them, they can do wonders for your life. I have read them, and I believe from my own experience that they have helped me a lot. They have helped hundred of other men and women like me a lot. So I have all the good reasons to believe that they will help you a lot. But it seems these days the likes of the authors of Chetan, Bhagat and Sharma have become ubiquitous and omnipresent, thanks to the growing intellectual vacuum amongst our reading fraternity, thanks to the deteriorating literary tastes, thanks to the deteriorating critical reasoning of our times, thanks to the ostensible media influences of our times. So people are reading anything and everything in the name of self-help book, which they should not. There are multiple reasons why we should not read self-help book. Because first of all, in the name of creating or providing solutions, they are creating customers. Most of the self-help books are not backed by what the great writers of the past have to agree with, or they are not backed by the empirical research. Most of the self-help books are propelled by the American bullshit of optimism, that you deny a problem and the problem evades. You stop looking at the problem and the problem vanishes, which is a big sham, I believe, because all the negativity, fears, worries and all the negative emotions are very much a part of human life, as much as happiness, optimism, gratefulness and all such greater happy feelings are. So we must need to see the things in perspective. So here are some of my recommendations, exactly what to read for if you're looking for something of real help. So first of all, the first name that comes to my mind is, of course, written by a mathematician, philosopher who has been awarded a Nobel Prize in Literature. So once upon a time during the First World War, he was teaching at Peking University, Beijing. And then the students of Beijing University turned up to him for some life advices, because he was a witty man but who banked a lot on reason. And he has an impeccable sense of the historicity of ideas. So backed by reason, a man who profoundly lived philosophy, who wrote volumes of books on philosophy and who has an impeccable sense of the history of ideas, he suggested that there are certain methods, there are certain techniques, there are certain philosophical analysis that needs to be done in order to be happy. And no wonder he came up with a book, The Conquest of Happiness. So please read this book, The Conquest of Happiness by Bertrand Russell. The book is divided into two parts, the causes of happiness and what makes a man happy. Let me read it from its preface, verbatim what Russell has to say. He says, the book is not addressed to the learned or to those who regard a practical problem merely as something to be talked about. He also claims that no profound philosophy or deep erudition will be found in the following pages. I have aimed only at putting together some remarks which are inspired by what I hope is common sense. All that I claim for the recipe offered to the reader is that they are such as confirmed by my own observation and experiences, and that they have increased my own happiness whenever I have applied them. On this ground, I venture to hope that some amongst those multitudes of men and women who suffer unhappiness may find their situation diagnosed and a method of escape suggested. It is in this belief that many people who are unhappy could become happy by well-directed efforts that I have written this book. So I believe this is one book to start with. But again, don't get deceived by the title, as the title itself suggests as it's going to be an easy read, but it is not that easy a read. So slightly difficult, but definitely worth your time. So here Russell's idea of happiness and how happiness can be practiced. And happy man is still possible, and happiness in thinking individual, as contrary to the popular opinion that it is not possible, is still possible very much in Bertrand Russell's sense of the term. Then guys, these days again there is a clamor for minimalism. Minimalism, which was once taken to its extreme and bizarre extent by the cynic philosophers, but now, if we talk of the modern day equivalent of minimalism, so it was practiced by none other than Thoreau. Thoreau was one of the pioneers of the transcendental school of American philosophy, transcendentalism, along with Walt Whitman, along with Emerson. He was one of the pioneers of transcendental school of philosophy, the Indian equivalents of which can be found in the writings of Tagore and Aurobindo Ghosh, I believe. So this one book that I will suggest to be read, it was written long before minimalism was in vogue. Walden. So Walden shares the experience of Thoreau living around a pond called Walden. He went to Walden, he shunned his materialistic life, and then he claimed, let me read it verbatim, that I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it has to teach, and not when I came to die discover that I had not lived. And thus the essential fact of life can refer to both material necessities and also the core of human existence. So here Thoreau is of course treating the hard facts of life as well as the philosophical questions of life. And it is also that he mentions how to make his ends meet. Another popular quote that is very famous from Walden is that the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation, from the first chapter Economy, which is perhaps the most famous quotation from Walden. It sums up the prophetic side again of Thoreau that many people forget about. He used the word desperation instead of a milder word, unhappiness or discontentment, because desperation also has a religious connotation. I can also draw a parallel when it comes to desperation when I may say, in Pilgrim's Progress, John Bunyan, Protestant spiritual classic, where the hero passes through a bleak lowland called the Slough of Despair on his way to meet God. So he talks about that how this whole American life, the mainstream American lifestyle is suffering to the core with desperation. Okay, and the monomaniacal pursuit of success and material gain are to no avail. It has failed to provide any satisfaction, any contentment, in the lives of Americans. And that again extends because, a classic is known by its universal significance and permanent relevance. So, of course, that applies to Walden as well, and the significance is universal. So what applies to American life very much applies to today's lives as well. So please read Thoreau Walden. One more quote I would like to, discuss while in the context of Walden is that Thoreau says that it is not worth the while to go around the world to count the cats in Zanzibar. Zanzibar is the name of a place. And here Thoreau very much talks in sync with Emerson, who believes that travels is a fool's paradise because it's more important, it's far more useful to change one's soul than to change one's landscape. The fool who thinks that his life will be changed on a trip to Europe is shocked and disappointed to discover that after unpacking his suitcase on arrival that he is still in the same tedious company of himself. So Thoreau is one book. It is to be read for minimalism. It is to be read for how, on the basic minimum needs you can support yourself economically and financially. Okay, what it means to living amongst the wood with a changing season. Okay, taking care of your needs. What exactly it means to be minimalistic. So if all these ideas interest you, I believe Walden is one such read and a very profound read. The next book that immediately comes to my mind, dear friends, is by a historian, but I'll not call him historian, I'll call him a philosopher among historians, a sage amongst historians. And this man has been much neglected by the academic historians, and nowhere in the academia, in the academic circle, this man is much talked about. Ironically, but he has been much read outside of the academic circle, and he has been a pioneer historian of ideas to have written 11 books on the volumes of civilization, none other than Will Durant. So Will Durant, one of the very last writings of Will Durant is Fallen Leaves, as it clearly mentioned last words on life, love, war and God. So this notebook was discovered 30 years after his death, posthumously by his granddaughter, and it was published later on. So this is an amazing book containing, snippets of wisdom, if at all you believe wisdom can be communicated. And the chapters are, just to give you a glimpse of what, it contains in the chapter. So chapter 1 begins with Our Life Begins. Chapter 2 is on youth. Chapter 3 is on middle age. Chapter 4 is on old age. Chapter 5 is on death. And so on and so forth. And then there are 22 chapters. And it ends with On the Insights of History. And then there are chapters on war and Vietnam, on politics, on capitalism, on art, on women, on sex, on science, on education. So Will Durant, I again repeat, is to be read for the eloquence of his language, for the sagacity, for the profundity of his thoughts, which I believe has been overlooked by the academic circle. And I again repeat, I consider him personally, that is again could be my subjective opinion, and indeed it is. He is a sage amongst historians. Just to give you a glimpse of, what kind of writing awaits you when you will be reading Fallen Leaves by Will Durant. So here are some of the quotes that are my favorite, that will give you a glimpse of his writing and wisdom. The tragedy of life is that it only gives us wisdom once it has stolen youth. Nothing learned in a book is of any use until it is used and verified in life. Man is always steeped in the ways and views of his youth, is almost constitutionally incapable of understanding the changing world that assails him. Health lies in action, and to be busy is the secret of grace, and half the secret of content. Let us ask God not for possessions, but for things to do for happiness. Lies in making things rather than consuming them. Life seems brutal because we think we are individuals, when in fact we are temporary organ of the species. The individual fails, but life succeeds. What great words of wisdom. I mean, every time I read Will Durant, I couldn't believe that he was a historian. He is better than most of the philosophers writing during his time. And no wonder again he was a contemporary of Russell, John Dewey, Eric Fromm, Albert Camus, Bertrand Russell, and all such writers. So I hope you enjoy reading Walden. Next book that immediately comes to my mind is by a profound psychoanalyst of the Frankfurt School, Erich Fromm. And this book is very special in a sense. When I read it first, I was amazed at the sagacity of his writing that I never expected a German psychoanalyst, a Jew who has fled from Nazi persecution to America, wrote volumes of books on psychoanalysis, is introducing Buddhism to the Western readers. He also talks about how this whole great spiritual industry is a big sham. All these self-help books are a big sham. There's a second chapter in this book, The Art of Being, that Erich Fromm was a little reluctant to publish because he had his own apprehensions in mind, and rightly so. But finally he published the second chapter in which he talks about meditation, he talks about Zen Buddhism, he talks about self-awareness, he talks about, living the life as it comes, living the life based on love, reason and productive activity. The art of being, what he calls it, and not the art of, and not the having mode of existence, but the being mode of existence, which means love, reason and productive activities. These three things are the things that cannot be possessed. They can only be lived. They can only be practiced. So this book, I dare say, if be read, it is sure to shut down the hoax spiritual industry that is going on in the name of self-help, that is going on in the name of enlightenment, that is going on in the name of personality development, that is going on in the name of art of living. Because this book clearly talks about, to my utter surprise when I read it for the first time, it talks about the second chapter of the book, I again repeat, it talks about, how this whole spiritual industry is creating nothing but customers. And again, they are like drug peddlers who are selling drugs and making victims out of their consumers. And it did talk about a very iconic name, seemingly iconic name, but he was a fraudster, sorry to say, as I dare say, Maharshi Mahesh Yogi, who was very influential in 60s and 70s in India. And this book indeed talks about what is the problem with these so-called Jagat Gurus, these so-called spiritual con man. So please read The Art of Being in order to understand. If you really want to practice mindfulness, if you really want to know what Buddhism is all about, if you really want to know how mindfulness, how the art of being can be practiced in day-to-day life, what is wrong with the obsessive, neurotic, capitalistic society of ours, and where all these is leading us to, please read The Art of Being. But before that, let me read you a few quotes that will give you a trigger as to what awaits you and what form writing has to offer. So he says that modern man has transformed himself into a commodity. He experiences his life energy as an investment with which he should make the biggest profit. Considering his position and the situation on the personality market, he is alienated from himself, from his fellow men, from nature. His main aim is the profitable exchange of his skills, knowledge, and of himself, his personality package, with others who are equally intent on a fair and a profitable exchange. Life has no goals except the one to move, no principle except the one of fair exchange, no satisfaction except the one to consume. And no wonder man's happiness, he writes, today consists in having fun. Having fun lies in the satisfaction of consuming and taking in commodities, sights, foods, drinks, cigarette, people, lecture, book, movies. All are consumed, swallowed. The world is a great object of our appetite. A big apple, a big bottle, a big breast. We are all sucklers. The eternally expectant one, the hopeful ones, and the eternally disappointed one. However, these two quotes are taken from his book, The Art of Loving. Now let me read a quote verbatim from his Art of Being. A person who has not been completely alienated, who has remained sensitive and is able to feel, who has not lost the sense of dignity, who is not yet for sale, who can still suffer over the sufferings of others, who has not acquired fully the having mode of existence. Remember, I told you the difference between having mode and being mode of existence. Briefly, a person who has remained a person and not become a thing cannot help feeling lonely, powerless, isolated in present day society. He cannot help doubting himself and his own convictions, if not his sanity. He cannot help suffering even though he can experience moments of joy and clarity that are absent in the life of his normal contemporaries. Not rarely will he suffer from neurosis that results from the situation of a sane man living in an insane society, rather than that of the more conventional neurosis of a sick man trying to adapt himself to the sick society. In the process of going further in his analysis of growing to greater independence and productivity, his neurotic symptoms will cure themselves. And no wonder Erich Fromm writes in his Art of Being that the danger of the past was that men became slaves, but the danger of the future is that men may become robots. What prophetic statement with the assault of artificial intelligence, Google, ChatGPT, and all such media communication technology. Men are indeed on the way of becoming robot. We are passing through an anthropogenic sleep, to use a phrase by Michel Foucault. And the problem of the 19th century, he very famously remarked, one of my favorite quotes of his is that the problem with the 19th century is that the God is dead. The problem of 20th century is that the man is no more alive. So his task is the man alive. His task is to propel and instigate some life and some mindfulness in today's human being, in today's society, to make the society more kind and more human. So again repeat, Art of Being, and a very invaluable suggestion. Please go ahead with it. The last book in this series, guys, of course, I mean, I'll be doing 4 series on these so-called self-help books, but these are not, again I told you, these are not self-help books. These are the gems of literature and philosophy, the greatest classics that can overwhelm and change your life if you can properly go through them. So the 5th book that I want to talk about is about a pessimistic German philosopher who was also a product of of his time, when the world was still reviving from French Revolution and Napoleonic War. A philosopher as profound as Schopenhauer, who was known for his pessimism. Apparently he was pessimistic. Apparently he has a very sad outlook towards life. But ultimately he was one of those greatest philosophers who has done wonders to introduce Buddhism, who has done wonders to introduce existentialism long before Nietzsche, and never has been the problem of life, the problem of evil, the problem of boredom, pain and alienation has been so profoundly discussed as in the case of Schopenhauer. He was indeed a pessimistic philosopher as the world understands him, but one of his writings published posthumously, in the year somewhere around 1890s or so, The Art of The Wisdom of Life, is one of the essays from this book, Pararega and Paralipomena, Volume 1. So one of the essays of this book, The Art of, it is The Wisdom of Life, and it is to be read. So here Schopenhauer answers, what exactly it means to live a life with wisdom, with open-mindedness, with certain degree of mindfulness. So here there's those who cannot delve deeper into the larger works of Schopenhauer. The Wisdom of Life is one of his last books that will give you the ray of hope and why what we can expect out of human life, and why it is sometimes futile to run too much after happiness, because he believes that we as a human being have placed too importance a value on happiness, because what he firmly believes, and I quote him verbatim, that what depresses and disturbs young people is the hunt for the happiness on the firm assumption that it must be met within life. From this arises constantly deluded hope and so also dissatisfaction. Deceptive images of vague happiness hover before us in our dreams, and we search in vain for their original. Much would have been gained if, through timely advice and instruction, young people could have eradicated from their minds the erroneous notion that the world has a great deal to offer them. And then he says that life swings like pendulum, backward and forward between pain and boredom. And then he again says that life is a miserable thing and I have decided to spend my life thinking about it. And then there is only one inborn error, and that is the notion that we exist in order to be happy. So long as we persist in this inborn error, the world seems to us full of contradictions. For at every step in the things great and small, we are bound to experience that the world and life are certainly not arranged for the purpose of maintaining a happy existence. And then what profound wisdom he ends this quote with. And hence the countenance of almost all the elderly persons wear the expression of what is called disappointment. This is our very own Schopenhauer, a pessimistic philosopher who has done tremendously for the cause of happiness. And if you manage to read Wisdom of Life, you will understand that it's okay to be a little bit pessimistic, because, as they say, optimism is the day after. Optimism is after night of pessimism. After night of optimism, pessimism is the day. So if you look things actually as they are, okay, rather than running for the vague images of happiness. So I think you still have the chance to be happy and content in your life. If you still don't shared, liked and subscribed my YouTube channel, arguably The Reading Quest, please do. Please ask your friends to subscribe it. Please keep on watching. Thank you so much.